everyone, my name is Valerie Gonzalez. I'm a reporter with the Monitor here, and we are going to be having a talk with Mr. Terry Palacios, who's a judge, and he's running for the position of District Attorney in Hidalgo County. Thank you so much for joining us, Judge.
No, thank you for the invite. Thank you.
And we're doing this interview in partnership with Futuro RGV, the League of Women's Voters, and McAllen Citizens League. So just tell us a little bit about your history, Judge. How long have you been a judge in Edinburgh?
I've been in judge. Well, I was elected back in 1994, so I served as an elected position for over 27 years up there in Edinburgh. I was doing magistrations and, of course, taking care of Class A misdemeanors and magistrations for anything from a Class B misdemeanor to a capital murder. So I dealt and worked with police officers for 27 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your qualifications for the DA position. What do you feel are some of your strengths?
Well, as a municipal court judge for 27 years, that's the only type of judgeship you can work. So at the same time, I was doing criminal defense, and I've been doing criminal defense for the last 30 years. So being a criminal defense attorney and being a magistrate at the same time kind of gives me a lot of qualifications. I've dealt with police officers, I've dealt with victims, I've dealt with juveniles. That gives me a strong basis to be a DA.
Tell me a little about your priorities. If elected, what would be some of those top priorities you would have?
Well, Mr. Rodriguez started off with specializing prosecution. We have the Special Crimes Unit for children, crimes against children. We have the Domestic Violence Crime Unit, which is very helpful. And I think we need to do a Major Crimes Unit. We need to do a Public Corruption Unit. And we need to do a White-Collar Crime Unit, thefts, stuff like that. So I think specializing in those type of prosecutions will specialize our prosecutors, will be more efficient, there'll be less trials because you know exactly what you're doing.
This is just a broad question, but as an attorney, do you feel that maybe we need a law school here in the county?
I think we should. I think, I know I would have benefited from a law school here in Hidalgo County. We don't have one. I had to go to Houston to Thurgood Marshall School of Law to go to law school, and that's quite of an expense to be up there. I think, being from the valley or being down here and knowing that our income is a lower income than the rest of the state, I think a lot of kids will benefit from law school down here.
Yeah, and the cost of living is so much
yes,
more
and you don't have
here.
to move out. You don't have to worry about going into a big city too. That's a shocker also. So that's a first year law student. Yes.
The commutes are pretty bad over there.
Yes.
One of the top concerns is the overcrowding at the jail. What are some solutions that you're looking at for alleviating that?
Well, there's a lot of solutions. First of all, starting to work with our municipalities, especially our smaller municipalities, speaking to our judges to make sure that nonviolent crimes don't get real high bonds. See if they could get bonds that are reasonable, so we can get them in and out, so we won't keep them. Second is, when I used to practice law, there used to be what was called the rocket docket out in Cameron County. I'm not sure if they still have it or not, but that is an avenue where you take people who are charged with felony offense that are not violent, and you try to indict them within a couple of weeks instead of waiting 90 days or 120 days before they get indicted, especially if they're sitting in jail. So it's called a rocket docket, and you try to get them into court, look at the case, get them a probated sentence, or get it dismissed, or get them a sentence, whatever we need to do just to move the case along, the caseload out of try to help the sheriff from that overcrowding. That's what we're trying to do. I think that's something we need to get into.
Okay. Some of the critics of the bail system complain that hundreds of thousands of legally innocent people are held in jails on a day because they can't afford to pay the bail, and so they're held a little longer. They complain having a bail system based on currency favors the wealthy who can afford to pay it rather than those who don't have as many resources and are sometimes stuck with a bond of $500 that they are not able to pay because either it's that or feeding their families. Under the current cash bail system, people charged with a crime can sit in jail for months, sometimes years, without seeing a judge because of that problem with affording bail. What would your position be on the current bail system?
Well, I think if you look at stats, when somebody gets a PR bond, they more than likely they're not gonna. A lot of times they're not gonna show up to court. If you give them a low bond, even if it's a small bond, they'll make an effort to make it back because they don't want to lose that money. So I think we just need to look at everything. We need to look at the person's crime, need to look at their income, and we need to let them sit there for a little bit to see what we can assess out of there, to see if we can help them out coming out. And if their parents or their family members want to sign for them, maybe that's a way to do it.
And just for some folks who don't know, a PR bond is when they're a person with recognizance that they don't have to pay anything until, or if they don't come into their court hearings, correct?
That's correct, and that's an option that our magistrates have, and that we need to speak to our magistrates to make sure they do consider, especially for first-time offenders and non-violent crimes.
If a defense attorney representing an individual in this position where they can't afford like a $500 bond, PR bond, I'm sorry, a $500, which would be like 10% of a $5,000 bond,
right.
What would you direct your prosecutors to do in that case? Would you direct them to perhaps agree to take a PR bond or to oppose it? I know you mentioned a little bit of the pros and cons of that.
Yeah, well, now we have a system that Mr. Rodriguez started. It's kind of the AIP system, Alternative Imprisonment Program, where they can get out as long as they're on a bracelet and they're reporting to probation. Other counties have a pre-trial probation where they're actually reporting to a probation officer on a weekly basis or monthly basis to make sure we don't lose them off the grid and they don't show up to court. So they actually have to follow conditions. Maybe that's something we need to explore.
Would there be maybe an example you can provide when a PR bond would be recommendable?
Well, I think possession of marijuana is a Class B misdemeanor, okay? And if you're a first-time offender and you're 17, 18, 19, 20, 30, I don't think you need to get a bond to a cash surety bond when you can do a personal recognizance bond. But that's really, by the time it gets to our court, that's something we just need to speak and communicate with our magistrates, because we don't set the bonds. It's up to our magistrates. So that's the communication we need to have between us and the magistrates, which we're talking about 22 different cities with 22 different courts and 22 different judges. But that's what we need to enhance. That communication, have more meetings, so they can realize how it affects our taxpayers by keeping people inside their jail.
You mentioned, I think, a program about reducing overcrowding in jail. Can you expand on what solutions there might be out there that you'd like to explore to reduce the number of people who end up jailed?
Well, if there's misdemeanor offense and only misdemeanor offense, we need to start looking at those after 2 or 3 days that they're in jail to see if we can actually contact their families or contact somebody so we can get them PR bonds to assure ourselves that they are going to show up to court. And if there is, then why not do that? If not, let's expedite the case, let's file a complaint, let's get them into court within a couple of weeks, and let's get that case done with.
In some situations, would there be like a recommended counseling or substance abuse type of programs that would be best for some of these low-level offenders? Sure.
I think that is very critical, especially for our youth offenders, 17 plus. I think counseling helps. A good counseling class, not just go take a drug test or take a 6-hour course. No, let's explore a little bit more whether they do have an issue. Let's talk to the parents. Let's talk to the schools. Let's see if they really have an issue with drugs or they're just experimenting. And we just need to communicate a little bit better with our school districts, with our community, with our parents to make sure we're doing the right thing.
So just a little bit getting more at the source, right? Of the
Exactly. Because a lot of these mental health issues start in our schools, and these kids manifest bad behavior because they're mental health issues. Now we don't get them help for the mental health issues they have. That may cause criminal acts, and now we send them to the juvenile department. Now they go into the crime world instead of trying to help them at the mental health. I think we just need to work a little bit harder with our schools and be a little bit more proactive instead of just reactive as a DA's office.
Okay, I understand. What would be also some of the policies concerning like victimless crimes, per se, like drug possession, small drug possession, prostitution? If there isn't an actual citizen claiming they were wronged by an activity and the violation is just a policy violation, is it the best use of taxpayer resources to prosecute these kinds of cases?
Well, I think we just need to, like a POM, first-time offender, that's never been in trouble. I think our cities and our chiefs can do a drug paraphernalia charge, get them some, if especially they're first-time offenders, and we don't have to go through all the booking procedure and bringing the file to the DA's office and taking the time to get a prosecutor in there. It costs a lot more money than what's going to happen to the child, and it ends up dismissed anyway. So why don't we do it at the lower level, especially the first-time offenders, and get rid of them that way? And I think then there's a whole bunch of caseload we can alleviate.
Correct. Okay. This question is about immigration. So last year, the governor asked counties in Texas to participate in the prosecution of migrants who trespass on private property as a means to deter illegal immigration. Critics counter that this is a federal authority, but the charges in the program were reworked to come with state jail time. Some counties, as close as Jim Hogg, are participating in this program, and while it may be up to the county to determine whether they want to or not, like the county judge and the commissioner's court, how would you think an initiative like this would impact the DA's office here in the county?
Well, it's not going to only impact the DA's office, because we're going to get a lot of caseload. It's going to impact our taxpayers where we're overcrowding our jails again. Because what are you going to do with an illegal? You can't give them a PR bond. So what sense is it for them to get arrested? I mean, I just can't see that's the avenue to try to take care of that. It's going to cost us a whole bunch of more money, and not only for the DA's office, but for the taxpayers and jail overcrowding. I don't see how that's feasible for anybody down here in reference to that. Because what do you do with an illegal? You can't give them a PR bond, because it's the same thing. You're just arresting them, booking them in, and then charging them with something, and then releasing them. Or we're going to have a whole bunch of illegals inside our jail for criminal trespass.
And we already have a problem here with the jails.
Yes, and beyond when they commit a crime, it's okay, because you're actually, but if you're just criminal trespassing because you're here illegally, well, that's something totally different,
Okay, and what would you do as a DA to better reach out to the undocumented population, to form a better bond with them and work with them when it comes to reporting crime?
Well, again, communication is very important to those people. I mean, if you want to come to the United States, there's avenues so that you can do this legally, and give them some options on how they can legally come in. And and there is programs out there. We just gotta educate them sometimes and work with them instead of just incarcerating them and giving them criminal trespass. But it's just a matter of education and communication.
Yes, there's a lot of people who live here who have lived here for a long time,
yes,
who are undocumented, and sometimes when they witness a crime, they're afraid that if they speak up, then they're going to get looked at as far as their status.
Right.
So outreach would be important in those kinds of situations.
As a criminal defense attorney, I represented a lot of people that were illegal, and that was one of the biggest fears. They're going to show up to court, either as a witness or as a defendant, they're going to get arrested. Well, they need to understand that state of Texas doesn't enforce immigration laws. That's up to the federal government. So as long as they understand that, they'll show up and go to court.
And then there's also the federal program of if you report, for example, domestic violence, and you're an undocumented victim, then that's, I know it's a federal program, but
well, there's a federal program right now. Yes, there's some protections. If you're a victim of a crime, you get a U visa, what is called a U visa, and that will protect you from getting deported.
Okay, just switching gears a little bit here. What do you feel about? How do you feel about the death penalty? Would you be in favor of it, against it?
Well, you just got to take the facts individually, and you can't just blanket over and say, you know what, I'm against the death penalty or I'm for the death penalty. You just got to see every case by case. Make sure there's no mental illness on the defendant's part. Make sure there's no way he can rehabilitate it in a way where you know and you understand that he's not going to rehabilitate himself. I mean, we just got to take everything into consideration before. If it's something that we need to penalize somebody with a death penalty, then we may have to. But those are far and few cases, I think, especially if we explore all these avenues.
And I guess one example would be the Victor Godinez case, where he shot a DPS trooper and resulted in a fatality.
Yes.
So something like that would be, something like that has already received the consideration for that. But some of the factors to determine whether that would be something that you would be aiming for as a prosecutor would be the mental health and the
of course,
criminal history.
if the defendant has a mental health issue and has always had it, and that was manifest through his bad behavior through the criminal act, then we need to take that into consideration. If his IQ level is so low that he don't really understand, we need to take that into consideration. And those factors, I think we need to take into consideration before we seek the death penalty.
All right, and just last year, the docket got pretty congested during the pandemic, and even so, I think there's still some problems trying to reduce that. And obviously, there's been a lot of obstacles because of just the global health crisis.
Right.
What are some of the ways that you feel you would kind of attack that problem if elected?
Well, I think we need to enhance our intake department and get everything indicted a little bit faster now. I know it's going to take some work. We need to look at all the nonviolent crimes and get them processed through the rocket docket system and get them in our courts as soon as possible to start alleviating some of that. Because of COVID, we lost a lot of communications with our police officers and our cities and stuff like that. We need to rekindle that too, so we can make sure we are arresting people the right way and with probable cause and look at all that stuff before. Computerizing our DA's office will be nice too. Everybody walking around. As a criminal defense attorney, I've been to Dallas and Houston, and I see the prosecutors walking around with tablets with all their cases instead of boxes of caseload, and that expedites a lot of stuff. So I think that helps, and just getting everybody with more technically savvy and having everything at their hand. If they need discovery, they could just zoom it or flash it to their computer. So that will expedite a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that can be very cumbersome, those boxes. And
yes, it is. And I can see when you need a box when you're going to go to trial or whatever, but most of the cases not going to go to trial. You're going to usually have, district court judges have dockets of the 35, 75 cases at one time. Hey, you're not going to take 75 files over there when you can have it all in your iPad and have your notes. I think our people at intake needs to start making notes of what the issues of the cases or what the positives and negatives of the cases from the very get-go. They need to relay that on the computer, so our prosecutors, when they get it, they already know a little bit about the case without having going through every detail.
Okay, so it's streamlining the process.
Yes, we need to start streamlining everything we can so we could just alleviate some of this such overcrowding.
Alrighty,
and cases.
And cases, okay. Yeah, I appreciate your time, Mr. Palacios. Thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone else for tuning in. Again, we're doing this in partnership with Futuro RGV, the League of Women's Voters, and McAllen Citizens League. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.